In this episode of Wisdom on Fire, I'm going to share some lessons on servant leadership that I've learned as I've reflected on the teachings of Jesus and the teachings about Jesus from Dallas Willard. I hope that you will get some takeaways on how to avoid being a bad servant leader and how to become a good one. Hi, I'm Dr. J, and I help Christian leaders avoid the darkness of meaningless work with the flame of Christian wisdom. Someone recently asked me what I think leaders really need to hear today. As I see a lot of leaders make this mistake, especially leaders who want to think that they're becoming good servant leaders. And servant leadership is, at its heart, motivated by compassionate love, motivated, and for many, by Christian love. Using Jesus as a primary example, I think it's imperative to think a little more about what we mean by love. Because part of where we get distracted is we've got some basic concepts. We know that if you were going to summarize the Bible in a single word, it'd be love. We know that if you were going to say, well, what is the nature of God? Well, God is love. What is it that Jesus ultimately embodied, in fact, incarnated for us? And it's love. And we understand that somehow, if we're going to get the Christian life right and be obedient to what Jesus really asked us to be, he asked us to be like God, to be transformed into his image, to be loving, which is why it's hard to talk about what to do to obey God or to love God without also loving people. Jesus united those concepts together. However, we see a lot of people today who are Christian pastors who get off track. And part of that is because they get off track on love. And so if you're really directed by this vision of love and understand what love is, then you'll stay on track with God's mission. And one of the ways that we misunderstand love is we take a more worldly picture of what love is. And that picture is often associated with, you do what I want and you approve of my desires and what I want. And so this desire approval, this idea that what love is you affirm whatever it is I am. You affirm whatever it is I do. And that's where it really gets into trouble, because what we are is made in the image of God. That's easy to affirm. We should be able to love one another. That the whole reason why we do this project of life, nobody's happy in life who doesn't love other people. But when we start thinking that what loving is to do what everybody wants, and this is where leaders really get into trouble, that when they get into this, I want to do what people want, it becomes a trap, either because on the one side, they're trying to say, oh, well, if I'm ultimately wanting to do what people want, I'm totally living in such a way that I'm doing what I think this community wants by vote. And why do I want to do that? And our vision gets skewed because it becomes kind of a popularity determines that the people determine what is good, that is the will of the group, the desires even more, are the group's goal. And on the other side, sometimes that becomes a trap for approval, that the leader gets trapped thinking about themselves, because what they really want is to make the group happy so that people like them. Totally gets us off track from really loving God and really loving one another. And there's a lot of people who formulated this. Dallas Willard is the one who helped me understand the summary, because love is to will another's good. And in the cause of business, in how we think about organizations, how we think about, any really organized group has a goal that organizes the group. they have a vision, a mission, these sorts of things. But ultimately, if we're driving that good's expression, and typically if these organizations are virtuous, there's a sense that they are providing things that God would provide for society, that they're aimed toward the common good. And if you're aimed at the common good, one's own good is included in that. And so there's a balance that's struck for the servant leader. By serving the common good, they can escape the trap of being stuck either in their own orbit and starting to look towards community desires, and they can also avoid the trap of not just approval, but just saying what the community desires is the thing that's good for them, as opposed to looking at what is good for the community, what purposes are really served by the community, and serving that. So, in many ways, love is the needle on the compass of how a leader should lead. That when the leader's saying, am I on track? That their orientation point is saying, what is really loving? What meets the good of the people that I'm trying to love? And it's not just a sense of the group, but in many ways, the model is based off of understanding each individual and what is common to each individual, as opposed to some idea of the collective. And that's a subtle distinction, but we've seen historically that when we place the collective, maybe something like the state, if you're in political science, if you put the state over individuals, often individuals are not well cared for. But if you consider individuals and look at what is common, the common good to have individuals flourish, often that brings about the true good, the true flourishing of the group. Well, let's make some servant leadership applications. 1, let's reflect on our motivation. To do this, we need to regularly assess if our actions are compassionate and unconditional, that we would love as Jesus exemplified it. So ask yourself, what is my leadership motivation today? Maybe do this prayerfully. Analyze whether your leadership is driven by a genuine desire to serve others or by the need for approval and acceptance. 2, embrace true love in leadership. If love in leadership means willing and working towards the greater good of others, and relationship with God is the highest good, then consider prayerfully ways to be loving. Ask God to help you to avoid the trap of merely fulfilling others' desires, and instead to give you focus on what is truly beneficial and transformative for them. 3, balance personal and collective goals. In other words, we want to avoid being a self-appointed martyr. Try to find godly ways to have your own needs met in Christ and His provision for you in order to have all the love for yourself and for others, because you're showing up to life's potluck and you need to bring something. 4, cultivate a love-centric, mission-oriented approach. This is where we want to anchor our leadership strategies in a mission that reflects the love and service the way Jesus would love and serve if He were us, using love as a guiding compass for decisions and actions. Here we want to encourage collective thriving by understanding and addressing the unique needs of individuals within the group. Thanks for joining me on Wisdom on Fire today. Let's fan the flame of Christian wisdom. Until next time.